Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest.
Fred Armisen.
Fritz Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. I'm Josh Modell. On this week's episode, we've got a couple of old friends who are both multi-hyphenates. Film directors, actors, writers, musicians, and perhaps most importantly, opinionated rabble-rousers who've spent decades pushing at the edges of culture, especially sexual politics, and gleefully widening its scope. It's John Cameron Mitchell and Sook-Yin Lee. Now, Mitchell is perhaps best known for co-writing and starring in Hedvig and the Angry Inch, the late 90s stage musical that became a cult classic movie. It was the beginning of a career that has championed queerness and otherness, pushing those things into a mainstream that has sometimes been welcoming, but most times not so much. He followed Hedvig with Short Bus, whose frank depictions of sexuality were probably a little too intense for wider audiences. Mitchell has also done really interesting work as an actor in other people's projects, including playing Tiger King Joe Exotic in a miniseries not too long ago. As you'll hear in this chat, he's working on a project about Allen Ginsberg in 1968, a time that should be more distant than 2026 than it feels like at the moment. Mitchell is heading out on a Hedvig anniversary tour that will include screenings of the film, plus live performances and conversation. Check out hedvig25.com for info. The other half of today's chat, Sook-Yin Lee, met Mitchell way back when, as you'll hear, when she auditioned for him, sort of. She had roles in both Hedvig and Short Bus, but has also lived other lives as a TV presenter in Canada and a prolific film director. For the past couple of years, she's taken her latest film, Paying for It, straight to audiences, along with her friend Chester Brown, whose graphic novel is the film's basis. It's a comedy about a couple that opens their relationship and one of them decides to experiment by paying for sex. You can stream it most anywhere now, and that's not all Lee's been up to. She just released a new album of catchy, skewed electropop called 72 RHR. Check out the song A Hollow right here. In this funny, fiery conversation, Mitchell and Lee talk about their early days together, about Allen Ginsberg and how the times he lived through don't seem to be over, about Mitchell's adopted New Orleans home, the power of art, and lots more. Enjoy.
Hello.
Hi, darling.
So, people listening, we're connecting on Zoom.
Yeah.
John, you're in a kind of red room. You're in a red room.
I'm in an Airbnb in Pensacola, Florida, which is the weird kind of panhandle town that they call the Redneck Riviera. It's also a Navy base, so it's a southern town, but it's got a loose port, craziness about it, which makes it more palatable. In the deep south, New Orleans and Pensacola are the best towns.
Are you on your tour right now? What are you doing in the red room?
It's pride. It's a kind of corporate free southern pride along Pensacola Beach. It's a long beach. And it's nice. It's like, pride is not my favorite thing. I'm not a huge crowd or thumping, four on the floor beat kind of person. But I'm so happy to see the young people and the queer people just finding each other in this weird time, when we have a president who's extremely trying to scapegoat the hell out of us, which happens periodically, right? The least powerful people get it. But I'm also working while I'm here. I'm working on a few projects. The one I was reading was a script by a wonderful writer named Agnes Berinsky, we're working with Jeremy O'Harris. I don't know if you know him. He's a theater person here who produces and writes. And this is about Allen Ginsberg in 1968.
Oh, sweet. I met Allen Ginsberg a few months before he passed.
Wow.
And he was in Toronto doing a performance. And you would never have known it because he really had a lot of gusto. He was the kind of guy who would refuse to take the elevator when there was stairs. After he performed, he would walk up all those stairs to his room and collapse in exhaustion. And people would have to deliver his food and he'd be barely able to lift a finger. And then somehow miraculously, like João Gilberto, the beautiful Brazilian singer, he was absolutely unable to, in his waking hours, stand up because he was usually drunk. But suddenly, come showtime, bing, he's up there singing like an angel.
Yeah, so many people are like that. They put it all into the stage, and Ginsberg gave so much of himself, and he was the supporter of everyone. He got Kerouac and Burroughs, tirelessly got them published. He, in effect, created the Beat Generation, named it, curated it, took care of it, and became, the godfather of the hippies. Was a Buddhist himself and believed in nonviolence desperately. And then in '68, things started to crack here. It feels like right now.
Okay.
Which is why I love this.
That's a perfect kind of like setup. Because speaking of Allen in 1968 and now, what is it, 2026? Okay, so dial back. I'm here in my living room, and this is also a film studio and production studio. It's 11 wide, turn of the century, last century row house where I've made 4 feature movies and recorded my new album, 72 RHR, which I'm just about to release this coming week. And yeah, here we are, the two, a bit of us. We met.
We've known each other since 2000.
Yeah.
We were introduced by Robin Cook, casting director.
I walked to a casting session for your movie Hedvig, and usually going for an audition is a very hostile experience.
Yeah.
Where there's
fun.
Executives behind a table who judge
Don't
you.
Shake your hand and
Yeah, and then go, thank you, next. But when I walked in, there was no table. There was just you sitting there. And I had brought a VHS tape of some of my comedy sketches. And you're like, let's look at them. And I showed it to you. And do you remember you just said, hey, do you want to make a movie with me?
Yes, it was a natural meeting. We're buddies. We're soulmates. We do the same kinds of things.
Yeah.
We make things in different forms. We don't limit ourselves, right?
Then we made Short Bus.
That's right.
I played
the lead.
We did Hedvig 3-inch and then Short Bus. I was just mesmerized with you, seeing you direct and act in Hedvig.
With the wig on.
And seeing how genuine and generous you are. And then we made Short Bus together some years later. And that was a wacky doolittle experience.
Yes.
I remember you saying that Short Bus couldn't be made today. And I was like, no, it could be. It could be.
Yeah. Not at that budget, maybe. After you make a big film, or let's say a film that got a lot of attention, like Hedvig and the Angry Inch, which got a lot of attention. It wasn't a big hit, but people found it on DVD, remember DVD. And it became a true cult film in that people passed it to each other one at a time. Mm-hmm. And people even, told me that when they were starting to date someone, they would show them Hedvig, and if they didn't like it, they would stop dating.
It's a litmus test.
It's a litmus test.
And Hedvig are both excellent litmus tests for first dates.
Yes. And maybe not the first date for Short Bus. That should be maybe the third or fourth date, because there's a lot of sex. And we were very collaborative in the way we worked on it. You helped create your character, name your character's goals. Mm-hmm. A sex therapist who had never had an orgasm. And rather than a shtick, we made it into a real person. Yeah. And in a certain time in New York, when there was a looseness, where there was a cheapness, people could have room and space to explore. And there was a salon that was kind of based on things I knew in New York that had, in the Parisian 1920s sense, yes, food, drink, art, but there was also a sexual element. And films were shown and society, and it was took place in a place that had events like that. But we're now in a time where perhaps the things that we have cared about most would be harder to make, if only because the streamers have upended the independent film situation.
And they're more conservative?
Well, they just don't finance those things. And people,
yeah, that's right.
As you know, people don't rush to the cinema the way they used to. You have, with paying for it, taken a model that certain friends of mine, like Sandy Dabowski, who's doing this movie called Sabbath Queen, going with the film, one theater after another, to build it in a personal way rather than a disseminate, advertise way, which, our films didn't necessarily have the money to do that anyway. But to get people to the theaters because we were there to the cinemas rather than staying home and do the old streamer thing. So that has changed things. Hedvig probably wouldn't be made at that budget today with that cast, meaning me. But what's nice about those things and other things that you've done, your 4 films, your music, your podcasts, is my favorite thing is when people see something that I did and say, that made me want to do my own thing.
Of course, yeah.
Right. That's the best compliment. It's not, I want to make a film like yours. And it's like, no, I feel freed to do so.
Yeah, inspiring. There's pronouns of like he, she, they, and we.
I love we. I get tired of that's not my story to tell. How about that's our story to tell?
Here we are.
We're collaborative.
Yeah, you're referring to Paying for It, my last movie that I co-wrote and directed and adapted from Chester Brown, my best friends. You and Chester, my best friends. Graphic novel. So basically the idea being that instead of going through a distributor, we took it on the road like the Romanian filmmakers have always done and packed it in, the back of their car and gone to like awesome independent cinemas across Canada and festivals and also the United States and Europe. I spent like the last year and a half touring with it. And oftentimes the screenings would be packed because they knew that I would be there, or sometimes Chester would be there. We're an odd couple. And so there would be kind of a show element afterwards. And that's what we did with Short Bus, where many of us were musicians and we would play band and suddenly put on a big show.
Yeah, we drew them into our party rather than joining their party.
Yeah.
And Cannes is, famously snobbish and elitist in its own way, but we kind of busted in there, and it was right before the financial collapse, I remember. So there was money for a party on the beach and the plage, the Croisette. I think MTV, we had taken their stage, so we were doing a concert on the water. Barry Diller and Diane von Furstenberg are docking their boats on our pier to watch the show. When I go to festivals, I try to create a queer or punkish space within it and have some parties for those people who don't want to play the can game. So in that case, we had a full concert with 10 of our cast. We had a band. Many people who work for the festival said that was the best party ever they had experienced at Cannes. And that was part of our deal. It's like, this film is not just a film. It's a party. It's a way of life. It's a way of thinking about respect for others, but also having fun while we're doing it. There's serious stuff in there, but it's not so serious that it's going to weigh us down. And we continue to do that.
I think this is the ethos, even before we hit Cannes, unwittingly sublining ourselves in a very bizarro, bougie environment and making the best and having fun. But even prior to that, like Hedvig, you weren't blammo right away on Broadway. You were like in a queer punk space, going to open mic nights one week after the other, developing this story of Hedvig. That was a genesis. I came up in Vancouver where there were no places to play, but there were poets and dancers and filmmakers and punks coming together to make stuff, finding abandoned spaces, bringing a generator, putting on a show. We could get up into all sorts of trouble. And I think that where we come from, musicians especially, because I don't know, that's my primary thing is music. Yours is, I don't know what yours is, but musicians are entrepreneurial people.
Yeah, you have to be your own producer in a way.
Yeah, you kind of like find a space, get your friend to sit on a stool, get $5 and do it. So there's really no stopping us, even now when it's harder to navigate.
Artists have always, like water, found their level, found the place where it's reasonable to make their work. In the US, the big cities, I'm sure Canada's very similar, but they're completely unapproachable real estate wise. So I think the future of art and activism is in smaller cities that are more affordable. I live in New Orleans, which is the last city that I would say has its soul intact in the US. Money and greed and real estate have crushed a lot of the spirit of city. Detroit has the spirit. I mean, there's still spirit in every city, but New Orleans doesn't like to change. And it's historically that way. or better and worse, but it's a collaborative city, right? The image of Mardi Gras and the marching bands in the second lines is a symbol of a creative city. The city is sort of in drag and it resists the rest of the South. You know, we have a very Trumpy governor who just took away our only Black congressman, you know, with the gerrymandering, just made sure to, you know, cut the legs out from under all the Black communities in the South is what's happening now. The Voting Rights Act is in effect over. And the only thing that I can do in this strange environment is to go back to my roots. And I've been talking to schools, I've been talking to young people who are very blindsided by today, right? They only have the tools of the past few years, which is more about a political correctness, language, stay in your lane thing, identity-based, which is useless in fascism. In fact, it serves to separate us when it's time to vote the fascist out. You know, we progressive people, let's say, we fetishize purity, you know, whereas people on the right are like, I just want a dictator. I don't want to read the fine print. You figure it out. I trust you. In the left, we don't trust authority, right? So it's very hard to agree on people and platforms. But I basically have been telling kids what you've just been saying, which is, all right, you need to stop canceling each other. You need to learn about punk, which is not a hairstyle.
You told me that young people were coming up to you and saying, can you teach me what is the punk?
How do I access the punk? And also they need to get laid, metaphorically and literally. You're 20 years old, that's your job. You're not doing it.
You were talking about 1968, Allen Ginsberg. And recently I was hanging out with David Cronenberg and Art Spiegelman, both on separate occasions. Both of those artists were around in 1968. And we were talking about, you know, what's happening in the world right now. And I said, it's kind of like 1968, isn't it? When the world was on fire and art was amazing. A lot of incredible art as a reflection, because artists, their mantle is to reflect the times. And the times were so dynamic and full of upheaval that there was a lot of great art. So I said to each of them, it's kind of like 1968 today, hey? And they both said, it's worse today. You know, and like my dad has always been a great barometer of stuff. He lived through war. He was an orphan. He's always told me, Sook-Yin, things are getting better, even though it's difficult. Things are getting better. But to these days, he's like, no, it's
it's actually getting worse now.
You know, and so art becomes crucial at a time.
Art Spiegelman?
Yeah, Art Spiegelman becomes crucial. Art is so important, but there are differences. Censorship is huge.
And global climate change, of course, are the two huge differences. The technology has, I believe, facilitated a certain kind of fascism that's a slow boil in the US and certainly happening elsewhere. It has anesthetized a lot of people into thinking none of this is really real. If all news is fake, then whatever Trump says is real. I also believe when all news is fake, all stories are true. Maybe art is one of our last tools to call attention to sanity.
Yeah, and it's really hard to make a living as an artist. Like, it's very like, hard. I thought, you know, when I started doing art, it was like a calling, truly a calling. I never did it for money, but I was able to like make some money. I remember at the time when punk broke, there were really shitty post-punk bands that were selling like millions of albums and making a living. And that wasn't too far away from now, but now it's really hard to make a living. So the artists that are there are not doing it for the bucks.
Not at all.
They're doing it because they have to.
They have to. Yeah. And other countries acknowledge it. I mean, even Canada has a bit more funding for artists than we do. We have nothing. And in fact, it's being cut down. And, you know, a lot of people I know are like, okay, where are we going to go? You know, not just as artists, but as people, because we can't countenance this government. It's just, we cannot support it. And I've always been a cosmopolitan. My mom was British. My dad was in the army. I moved around a lot. So I can imagine living elsewhere. Of course, now I have a house in New Orleans, which feels like its own country. And it has a ballroom in it where art happens all the time.
You live in a Willy Wonka house.
Yes. It's
I mean,
180 years old, and it was 5 churches, including an occult church that I bought it from.
very fitting.
Hmm. It's a very witchy house.
A lot of people couldn't afford to live in New York City and
No.
moved to New Orleans like yourself. Like in Toronto, where I am, the rents became so high, everybody had to leave. And they're now in Hamilton and small cities.
Does that
And you're
make
right,
Hamilton and
a lot of the time, these movements, Olympia, Washington, Vancouver back in the day, Seattle,
Boise, Idaho,
a bunch of people from Short Bus. Julian came from
Athens, Georgia, in the
Georgia.
South,
Amazing
Georgia.
places. And I think that's true. Great things are happening in tiny towns. But like in Vancouver, I just found out there's new legislation trying to shut down all the DIY art spaces. So if it's not already difficult enough, now municipal governments are intentionally trying to shut down DIY art spaces.
Yeah. Very short-sighted, because as we know, it's the artists and the queers and the misfits who create the texture in a city and give it its of course, there's history. And like New Orleans, I mean, there's a deep trove of history and slavery of French, Cajun, French Canadian, Acadians coming down, which we call Cajuns. We have Spanish, we have Caribbean, Honduran. It's a gumbo. I think of New Orleans as a kind of a great metaphor for the U.S. It's the bottom of the Mississippi. It's the sphincter of America.
Yeah.
It all comes out there. And for better or worse, that makes it very fertile crescent, but slightly fetid. And, we're also in Cancer Alley, oil refineries. It's everything is there. We are like a boil on the ass of America. We're never going away.
Yeah, so many great spaces. I at first was like, do I bring paying for it to the States? I was like, oh my God, I don't want to get disappeared. I don't want to get disappeared. And then I went, damn it, there's so many good Americans who need to see paying for it. And I have so many friends. I must go down there.
You got a warm welcome, didn't you?
I had to have a very warm welcome. And then allies like Mae Martin and Elliot Page, yourself, came to Jordan Tannehill, came to help out in launching the film there. I was so happy. I met so many. There used to be the cliche of the obnoxious American tourist. That was around when I was a kid. But when I was in the States, I was like, oh my God, the Americans that I'm meeting are more polite than Canadians now. Something happened. And very sweet people that I met, and like up in arms, depressed, upset about what is going on in the world, but then also willing to go. Chester Brown is an incredible underground cartoonist, and that peership amongst underground cartoonists is very, very strong. And I remember sitting one night with a group of underground cartoonists, and they were like, yeah, Trump wants his face on Mount Rushmore. And instead of capitulating and being bummed, they were like, bring it on, bring on all the ridiculosity until we're unable to ignore. And then when everything breaks down, there is a possibility to rebuild. I was like, oh, that's a fresh perspective. That's good. So, progressively, it drives me crazy. I try to pay with cash. Cash is king. But so many places they're like, sorry, we don't take cash anymore. And I think it all happened during the lockdown when we were all stuck in our houses. And then everything became digital. And I'm thinking to myself, what about all the senior citizens who might not be so well versed with laptops or computers or even have a smartphone? Are they just like screwed? Are they just not part of the society anymore? And so everything is sort of progressively going toward just having something, I do everything on my phone kind of thing. I don't do everything on my phone, but like friends have said, yeah, why didn't you just do it on your phone?
Yeah, both of us understand from where we come from, me from the military, from theater, you from punk rock, from all kinds of art events, that people in the same room is a balm and a medicine and an antidepressant and an understanding that we are still fucking human. And when you're staying on those computers plugged in, you start to lose that. You start to lose your hope in humanity. You start to find a kind of depression, and the ADD builds and you can't concentrate.
Yes, that's right.
If you can't read even a a long article online, you have this sugar high of short bits, and you stop feeling. I had to relearn how to read a novel about 15 years ago because it was going away because of digital stuff. And I
Wow.
did, because that was one of my great comforts and joys, is reading a book. And I had to force, okay, this is the time for reading. That's the time for the other. I don't check my phone at night. Everything's in the morning. Keeping a digital diet helps. One of the things I'm doing this year, starting Friday, is the 25th anniversary of Hedvig. I'm doing a tour of screenings throughout North America and a bit in Australia and Europe. I think it's about 40 dates in North America. I start in Monterey and then Mexico City. I'm coming to the Danforth in Toronto. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Danforth.
I'm going to join you up there.
Yeah, I would love that. The bean field in Montreal.
And they're also doing short bus in Montreal.
That's right.
The double whammy, Hedvig
Yes.
short bus.
But we're going to have a blast. And part of it is also we're going to sing afterwards. I'm bringing my guitarist. You better be singing some songs. And we'll get the band back together. I'm just going to get people together, cheer them up again, remind them that the good people are still here. It's just that the bad people, at least in the US, have climbed to a position of power. But the good people are still here. We now know who the fucking opportunists are, the bootlickers of the fascists. And this too shall pass.
I think the pendulum always swings. And there are certain things that are repeated through time always. But then we are kind of confronted by the technology that is swerving it a bit, like what you were saying about inability to concentrate and focus. I have a friend who feels like people are becoming unhinged from reality. And my thing was like, I guess reality is always shifting, depending, like we can make our reality and we can make it as beautiful as we want to. People can make things happen. But if you're only defining a reality by what you're seeing on the screen and in the news, it's going to be very different and kind of a bit more scary, quite a lot more scary. So those choices that we make outside of the screen life are really important. And yet screen life is really freaking important.
It is. You start to get people going crazy. Look at all those people during COVID. I actually loved COVID. I made an album. I had a great time. You probably did too. But other people went down the rabbit hole and they became conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And they started, again, all stories are true now, including the crazy ones, the ones that are supposed to explain why our life is bad.
Yeah. And now AI.
There's always someone to blame, whether it's the Jews, the immigrants, the queers, or the AIs, or the shadowy, trilateral commission. There's always aliens. It's like, do we really have to go that extreme to explain why our lives aren't the way we want it? We have to have aliens. We have to have progressives eating babies. How about we just disagree and then we work it out? But it starts to become apocalyptic and almost religious in its madness, which is why the school shootings, are rife. The third possible, whether it's fabricated or not, assassination attempt on a various a kind of president who's unpopular with a lot of people. These are all now taken in stride in the US. That's maybe why it's worse. Kent State changed everything in terms of the view of protesters and the war. If Kent State happened now, it would be another blip. It would be just another daily thing. Though the one wonderful thing, I met the mayor of Minneapolis who came to see me in Oh Mary on Broadway.
Nice.
I introduced him as, this is the guy who helped create to stop ICE, to at least put up a roadblock and said, no, not here.
I think the ICE thing, when that hit, people were like, whoa, stop now.
Yes. When two people are killed, there's other people killed right and left, but two white people.
Two white people killed. People are like, whoa, wait.
Right.
And then they kind of pulled back a bit, but it's not like
They're
that's
still doing
away. It's just
they're still doing it.
Figuring out the re-strategizing.
Yeah.
Is it so crazy that this drive for power and money is so short-sighted to see how incredibly devastating it will be, poisoning everyone around?
And that's the one thing right and left have closed ranks on in the US is these damn data centers, because they see the direct effect in small communities.
Mm-hmm.
And communities are always the goal. We all know people who perhaps vote in a way we disapprove of, who are good people. They've grown up a certain way. They're in a certain culture. It's almost uncool to vote differently from your culture. So some people get a little lazy and they just vote for whoever everyone else is. Until the thing you can't spin, governments can spin, oh, this is not real. This is fake news. That war is such and such. They want to kill your babies. They want to, et cetera, make your kids gay or trans. The one thing you can't spin is what's happening in your home. And one of those things is people can't afford it. So you can't spin higher prices. You can't spin no health care in the US. They've cut back on Obamacare this year. Gas prices have gone up at least $1 and it's going up. It's like these are absurd things that people who voted for Trump cannot ignore because they're happening to them. And even if they're self-serving, don't give a crap about anyone other than them and their family, they are now suffering, and that you cannot avoid. Those people will be jumping off his ship. Not all of them. Some of them see him as God, as he seems to see himself. But in the meantime, we try to remind people what is beautiful about their humanity, what is beautiful about community, what is the use of the outsider to the mainstream. Maybe the outsider has a privileged view of a bigger picture and can bring some new perspective to those who aren't outsiders. I don't believe in separatism.
I think everyone's the same amount of smart. It's just a matter of whether or not they've been exposed to ideas or just influence. Yeah. And I think there's so much, I don't want to just shit all over the internet because there's a lot of great stuff. The only reason why we could ram people into theaters was because I was able to use social media to reach people. And then they would find me there and then meet me in person. And that was really awesome.
Yes, that's the goal. Yeah. To me, the phone, the internet is in order to get people together, not as the end place to end up. I'm meeting a lot of young people who came up during COVID. Mm-hmm. Granted, these are kids who have resources, to go to college and stuff, but they have been so misraised in isolation that there's a kind of acquired, the symptoms feel like you're on the spectrum. I.e., I can't really read the room. I can't look someone in the eye because I never have. On a computer, I'm looking at you, but we're not looking into each other's eyes because the camera's at the top of the screen. Now I'm looking at you, but I can't see you.
I'm looking in your eyes.
Yeah, but I can't see you. I want to put a camera in the middle of a screen. I invented...
Just an eyeball.
I invented Grindr and Shortbus. Why not a big eye? But all my friends who are therapists for young people say that the young people for the last few years all want to be queer, be identified as some sort of queer because it makes them special.
Very cool.
Yeah, but
pretty soon straight's going to be the new cool.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like peer pressure, obviously. And then the next thing they want to be, which they still do, because the queer thing is fooled, right, because of top-down trans and homophobia, is they want to be on the spectrum. I'm on the spectrum. I'm sure of it.
Oh, yes.
They are desperate to be on it.
Everyone's on a spectrum. It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. Right. But my therapist friends are saying it's to explain how they feel, but also maybe so they don't have to do any hard work to get out of it if they're not on the spectrum. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you do have to work to find, if you grew up during COVID and screens and watching too much porn, you have to retrain yourself to be with people, to have sex with people, to have relationships. A lot of young people are avoiding those things because they're uncomfortable. They haven't been trained. They're not dating in school. They're not getting laid in college.
It's almost like, the lockdown whetted our kind of isolationism, and the internet reinforced that. But at the same time, I got to say, there are a lot of freaking dynamic people that I'm meeting, and I don't know if you've seen the latest movie, Obsession. It's I see a lot of movies and I'm not really jazzed about a lot of mainstream films, but here's these kids. His name is Curry Barker. He's in his mid-20s. He came up on a sketch comedy YouTube channel that him and his pal put together For less than what we made Short Bus on, they made Obsession, which is a horror film that is hilarious, well wrought. Like so many people that were raised with phones are sophisticated visually and story wise. And they make this movie and it's already made $100 million and it costs like peanuts to like make. And it's good. It's a horror movie with a lot of satire and insight. It's intelligent. And then there are a lot of just very dynamic people making stuff. And that is totally counter from the sort of art world, art house, cinema industry that we know.
It's DIY. It's a version of punk. And that's what Hedvig was and Short Bus too. Certainly we had some help from corporate to get there, but there's no way they could change it. It was too weird for it to actually be corrupted. So we, in effect, laundered their money. But very inspiring because as we know, it isn't the moment of independent film commercially, right? We have to do more to get it to audiences because streamers are not helping. But one of the things that is happening because Hollywood has stepped out of the small film department, they've even stepped out of like Oscar-y mid-level, it's either, giant films or tiny films with stars in them. And then super small ones like you're talking about who tend to move towards genre because, horror is the one place where people are open to, I don't care that there's a star in it, right? It's one of the few places that sell. So if you take that genre and do something interesting with it, great, right?
Yeah. And they seeded their audiences like dorky young people being silly and making hilarious sketch comedy stuff.
Yeah.
Just uploading it and then finding like a resonant audience, all the shut-ins who are like following this stuff.
I want to make a horror film that's emotionally, wrecks you. I love playing with genre, but in effect, when corporations withdraw from a certain area, that's the time when we can step in.
Yeah.
When someone abandons a building, you step into it and squat it. And that is what we can do because corporations they used to be really interested in small films and let's say independent music in the 90s. Now they're not. So we now have more tools technologically to make that music and film. It's a lot easier, right?
Oh, yeah. I made 2 features using my DSLR cameras and my cell phone. And then I actually sold it to a broadcaster and I could buy a better camera, like a 4K camera. And so, there's all kinds of tools. I edited one of the features on iMovie, the one that I sold to the broadcaster.
Which is, of course, what the film Tarnation, Jonathan Coet was the beginning of that. If you haven't seen it, watch Tarnation. It's an autobiography on acid. He shot his whole life. His mom was mentally ill and he dealt with it by shooting his life when he was a kid, in a way that people do now, but they didn't do back then. And he edited it on his iMovie. He auditioned for Short Bus. He had a small part. I became an executive producer. We brought it to Sundance and Cannes and it won all these awards, best documentary of the year.
Very influential.
Yeah. And this kind of punk doesn't go away. And especially now there is space for it. The key, of course, is the distribution of it. How does it get out there? We have the internet. We don't necessarily have a streamer or a distribution site that is doing the most interesting things. I mean, I think Mubi is trying to, Mubi. But this is an opportunity. It's a time for punk to start again. And to me, the original goals of punk were the same as the social justice warrior who's policing your language. Justice, kindness, suspicion of capitalism, mutual aid, how do we help each other?
I think for me, care is the key. To care in a time where people are careless and we're being told to swipe and not care. To care really makes life fun. I care about that.
And it's a kind of resistance, the one thing that I can't believe, it makes me feel so good, is David Burns on tour, and he's been quoting me in his tour.
Yes, I saw that. What's the quote that he was saying?
Well, he paraphrased it, but basically he was saying, because I'd written an op-ed in the New York Times, and then I did an interview there, and in the interview, I think I said, look, today, love and kindness are a kind of punk. because they're so at odds with everything else. And David said, I had to think about it because you don't think of kindness and love. But then he's like, no, these are forms of resistance. They come out in different ways.
And they're so inherent. Like as a broadcaster, I spent many days interviewing strangers on the street and just saying, asking them if they would open up and share experiences from their lives. And oftentimes, like we're told, shut up. Why should anyone listen to you? And yet when they saw that I was honestly curious about them, they opened up, and every day I would feel humbled that I met such incredible people. Everyone's kind of the star of their incredible lives. I've seen people work together. This is the truth. It doesn't get headlines because it doesn't sell ads.
People want conflict.
I mean, I'm thinking about alternatives. And so like everyone with a car is experiencing the spike in cost of gas. This is affecting musicians' ability to tour. It is now very, very difficult to put all this money on the line to fill your tank to get out there, to buy an airplane ticket. So a friend of mine, I think you met him, Stephen Jackman Torkoff.
Yeah.
He was in one of my films, Octavio is Dead, a great actor and performer and musician, goes by Cosmic with Love on Instagram. Stephen has decided to tour locally. So they're not going across Canada, but they go, meet me at this sculpture at 12, at 1:30, go over to this field and meet me there.
Yes.
At 3, meet me at the ferry dock. 5 tour dates in a row in 24 hours. And they're getting amazing people coming out. I was like, that is brilliant.
That is so good. And those are old tactics. They were political tactics, right? No one can track you down. It becomes fun. I remember in the 80s, people are like, hand out a little tiny flyer and it's like, party in the cash machine building. It was a huge one in New York. And there was people brought drinks and it was a party there. And it's like, we can continue this sense of punk and joyful punk. I even think of AIDS activism as applied punk. No one had our back when Reagan let us die in the 80s. Nobody had our back. Eventually, Elizabeth Taylor showed up. But, it was like, or Madonna briefly, felt more like applique for her. But there was a sense of, we have to save ourselves now.
Yeah.
And we did. And we did. I was the first generation of safe sex, so weirdly I was safe. But people a little older than me were dying. And the lesbians stepped up. They were not affected by AIDS physically as much, but they stepped up because it was the right thing to do, because the dykes always step up. God damn it. God bless them. And, I feel that also we've got to step up for our trans sisters and brothers and non-binary. It's like the movement of reminding ourselves that life is not a binary in gender or in any other way. It has flexibility. It has nuance. It is something that we know as humans. Even if you're in a small town and you're very conservative, everybody's quite different. That guy is gay and that woman's lesbian. It's like, if you're part of the town, all of the bullshit of involving otherization goes away because you have a job to do. When there's a hurricane, you better know your neighbors and you're not judging them by their sexuality or politics. You're trying to survive. And that's the kind of punk we need to get back to. But listen, I have to go now because I'm being thrown out of my Airbnb right now.
Before we go, because Josh is now going to boot us out of this room. He's from the Talkhouse. Let's tell people where they can find us in real life. I have a movie. It's called Paying for It. And I just toured with it for 2 years. So you're going to have to find it online on your streaming thing. It's really wonderful. And John was the executive producer. It's full of heart and humor. And I also have a new album called 72 RHR. It's on a tiny label called Hand Drawn Dracula. James Mejia heads that up. And I'm releasing that within days. And we made a tiny press of like 100 albums, and it'll be on CD and streaming, and I'll be taking it on the road or perhaps touring locally.
Right. I have the Hedvig 25th anniversary tour. If you go to hedvig25.com or my Instagram, John Cameron Mitchell, you'll see information there. I have a show in New York at Town Hall for Pride in June. But I'll be near you at some point, and in Canada a lot. All right, I got to run now. I love you.
Okay, I love you so much. I'll see you very soon.
Okay, mwah.
Thanks for listening to the Talkhouse Podcast, and thanks to Sook-Yin Lee and John Cameron Mitchell for chatting. If you liked what you heard, please follow Talkhouse on your favorite podcasting platform and check out all the other great shows in our network. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the Talkhouse theme is composed and performed by The Range. See you next time.